What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin. But before I get into the Bitcoin charts, I want to talk about some relative information regarding Donald Trump, politics, the tariff wars, and the negativity that this has espoused in the market. So if we look here, we can see that Donald Trump has declared national emergency, increasing competitive edge, his desire, also protecting sovereignty, also strengthening national and economic security. And this is very much so related to the tariffs. Obviously, at this point, the tariffs have already been causing issues such as downsides. Recently, we saw this already affecting the market. Now, even more so, we're seeing, as you can see, your gold stocks are plunging after the U.S. allies and others are responding to these tariffs, which again, is not generally a new thing. It's been going on for a few months at this point. If we look here, this one post here on X, the Magnificent Seven stocks racing 3.4 trillion in market value. This group has shed more than the entire value of the German and French stock markets. Magnificent Seven is down approximately 20% since its peak and is trading at its lowest level since September. And this was on April 1st, so it's probably down further than that at this point. This person also went on to say the market euphoria is gone. You can also see here, this was here at the end of March again. This person saying that the Magnificent Seven has eventually entered the bear market after falling more than 20% from the peak. Really, generally, sentiment, I mean, again, nothing really new, even outside of Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies. It's not looking the greatest. A lot of people are not happy with Trump and these tariffs. Obviously, there is a longer term, medium to longer term plan. If only the pressure being put on the outside forces from these tariffs eventually gets what Trump is desiring, which is, again, goes back to this fact sheet put out on Wednesday about declaring the national emergency, trying to, as I said, increase that competitive edge, protect the sovereignty, and strengthen our own national and economic security. But really, the longer term, medium term, longer term, roughly medium term goal of all this is to obviously coming along with the Internal Revenue Services, the IRS, getting rid of that, establishing the External Revenue Services, taking away certain taxation, such as income tax and other taxes as well. Now, again, as I was saying, a lot of people are upset. They're not a big fan of what is going on. And the sentiment really seems to be that if we're looking here at the SPX, especially with the Magnificent Seven being the top 7 of the traditional stock market indices, entering what many people are referring to as bear market territory. And if we look here specifically, going all the way back to around, for as of now, back to 2022. Most recent pullback so far for the SPX is 12.3%. The last time something like this was seen would have been going back to here around the beginning of 2022, which ultimately led into a 27.5% move. But afterwards, obviously, from then on, it's climbed up 76%. It's also similar, if you can see, the price is coming down and closing below the 50 EMA band. And the 50 EMA itself looking quite similar to where it is currently. Also roughly same time of the year, really just more towards Q1 of 2025, so about 3 years later. So this is the worst drop that it's seen since this time back here in 2022. If we go back to 2018 leading into 2020 here, you can see that these moves here were about 11%, similar to what it's done now, 20%, and then here at most 35%. And each of these times you can see, at least with these latter two, the 17% move after closing below the 50 EMA, and this one was about, like I said, 35. So anywhere from around 20, if this continues to get worse and worse, whether it's because of the tariffs or just because there's a massive stock market crash in general coming, again, not solely because of the tariffs and what Trump is doing. Obviously, it's a lot bigger than just the microcosm of what the current presidency is doing. It factors in years in the past as well and how that affects the market going into the future, where we can see the 200 EMA sits at around 4.7 thousand points, whereas that'll be around a 23% pullback, and then pushing that 30 territory, 30%, which is the most we've seen going back to 2020, 2018. And also, again, this one was, what, 27%, so 27% would have been around 4.3. Really, generally, this vector zone right here, it gets to the worst case, and like I said, going back to around 2018. And even then, it could still, obviously, come down to this vector zone and continue to bounce and go higher. Although, for those of you who've been watching my videos for a while, plenty of times, I don't remember exactly when the last one I uploaded was, but I've gone over how, looking at the last, roughly a little over, 3 to 4 decades of, the SPX, even like NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, I've been thinking for the last few years, around 2 to 3 years, that there is, in the near future, just leading into the end of the current decade, around the 2030s, likely will be some sort of quite catastrophic traditional stock market plunge towards the downside, and this very well could be the beginning of it. Now, obviously, the stock market's down quite bad, but Bitcoin, all things considered, obviously the tariffs and everything else, is doing and holding up fairly well, if I may say so. It's only down, at this point from top to bottom locally, 30%. Most recently, it's only dropped around 8%. Stock market's down a little bit worse. Obviously, with the SPX, it was only around like 12%. And then Bitcoin overall here has been 30%. But generally, looking at the bigger picture as I go on further in these higher time frames, it's in the grander scheme, looking at back to the beginning of the bull market up to now, just looks a bit stronger, quite a different case as opposed to the SPX or the traditional stock market. At least that is just my view. If we look here at this 4-hour chart, we could potentially be flipping this more shorter term resistance here into support as it's coming down. Bitcoin going sideways since around the 29th of March. There was this ascending channel that it was building up in for a number of days. Bitcoin recently came out, and once it had the break below this, moved back up to retest what was the resistance around 87.8, approximately 88,000. Was rejected here also along the 800 EMA. It's come down to, again, retest this shorter term resistance that I've pointed out. So it's going to be very important to get above this 800 EMA over the next, just within the next month leading into April. So anywhere from around that 88, really 90,000 is going to be a crucial value, not only according to the price data and the horizontal levels, but also psychologically. Really none of this has changed. Everything I've mentioned in the last video is pushing back up to around 97, 98, 99. Obviously 100,000 is going to be very important. I would have to say, unless there's going to be some sort of like triple top scenario form out, that once it starts to push back above that 100,000 towards 105 and higher, then especially if volume supporting. So in other criteria met that more likely than not, I think that will be leading into and initiating the final move towards the upside, as I still don't personally believe that the bull market is over for Bitcoin, despite the sentiment being absolutely terrible. Look here at the fear and greed. It's back down fairly low, still in the fear at 28. It had moved up towards the 50s recently. It was looking not too bad as Bitcoin was here moving from this local low at around 77, 78,000 back up towards the 88, $89,000 range. But I mean, really all things considered, I mean, generally there's not too much going on other than the tariffs and other larger macroeconomic factors seemingly keeping the price, I wouldn't necessarily say down. I mean, obviously Bitcoin, especially if we go here to the higher time frames, before I get into the 12-hour look here at the weekly, there's still this ascending long-term support zone that's been support since the beginning of the bull market here. Support in October 2023, October, September 2024. Now, currently, Bitcoin is sitting right along it. Again, as I've mentioned this a few times, also right along the 50 EMA, which has been support the entire time. There's this RSI support as well that's being held. If you look here at the stock RSI, we're seeing it flip up here each time we've seen that. each of these times prior here during leading into November. Here, when Bitcoin moved from 25,000 to 75,000, and then here from 50,000 to 108,000. Now we could see something similar to where we saw the stock RSI flip bullish here and then continue to chop sideways. So we might see something along those lines and maybe see a final move down to the very bottom of the stock RSI range. If so, and it's something similar to what happened back here, we would generally just kind of see a relative sideways action, maybe see one more wick to lower than the recent local low of around just approximately 77,000, maybe wick down to 75,000 approximately, maybe a few $1,000s lower. Ultimately, still, it would be held up within this 50 EMA band. As I've said each and every single time. If you look here, February, March 2023, again October 2023, and then again September, October 2024. Right now, until Bitcoin starts to lose this ascending uptrend, and still until it starts to lose the bottom of this 50 EMA band, and then it starts to significantly go below this vector zone right here, then I don't think there's particularly any major means for worry to think that the bear market is definitively began and that $109,000 was the top. We could potentially be seeing the MACD starting to bottom out and coil back up here. Nothing really too solidly shown here, but we could potentially, from the way I see it, be seeing these early initiatory moments of that coiling back up. If you look here at the RVI, it is essentially in the most oversold territory here that it's been in for the entire time of the bear market or the bull market. Again, lining up with each of these critical moments that I've already pointed out in various times. But if we go back here to the 12-hour, once more we see the similar trend lines here, the resistances that I was showing on the 4-hour. Could be very well be flipping this into support as the long term here, going all the way back to roughly November of last year. It's around 5 months or so approximately at this point. Finally, as I've mentioned this a few times, being flipped here as we're seeing it finally break out above, seeing this kind of snake serpentine. It's just interacting with it here as we are breaking again the shorter term resistance. It's going to be very important to see the Bitcoin move back above this 50 EMA band. It's been on this 12-hour chart, more specifically the resistance ever since it broke below back in right at the beginning of February, as you can see here. And whereas this upper resistance, the longer term one, lies roughly right in tune with the 200 EMA, which is sitting at around 89.2 thousand. So that's going to be very important. Again, moving back above really kind of the median of the sideways range here is going to be around that $98,000 value that I mentioned on the 4-hour. As always, there is still the potential for another move back down here. Maybe what we see is the RSI form an ascending support here, and we see the price come down lower, and maybe it fulfills this vector zone, maybe down to approximately 70,000, as I mentioned, continues to go higher, whereas we'll see the price support descending, and we'll see the RSI ascending, continue to see some bullish divergence there, moving into the actual local low itself. That would also correspond with the 800 EMA here being met, and I believe going back here, we can see that the 800 EMA was met here twice, leading into approximately 49,000 here, and then here around 52.5, which then led into the movement all the way up here to 109,000. To go even back further, you can see that once the price moved here during this prior sideways action here, below the 800 EMA, quickly boom back above. Obviously, it came back down once more and went below, but ultimately, each time this happened, it was generally in a sideways bottoming out. It may have taken a few weeks for that to play out, but that is indeed what ended up happening. I also have been mentioning the 200 and the 50 EMA cross happening, whereas we saw it back here, leading into this low, which then led all the way up here to 75,000. We saw these crosses here and here, which was happening right as Bitcoin was going sideways here, really outside of this quick move to 49,000. Once we saw the 50 EMA go below the 200 here, the local low was essentially already met, or at least known, outside of that quick move to 49,000. And that is what Bitcoin saw here at the beginning of March. So we could, again, just be seeing sideways action here into a further move towards the upside, or maybe we will see this horizontal broken once more to then go a little bit lower, as I mentioned, and then continue to go higher towards the upside. If you look here at this 2-weekly chart, we can see here that the open interest money flow index, I pointed this out, I think it's going to be quite important to see how this plays out and it deciding the trajectory, as I've mentioned in the last video, where you can see each of these descending trends here every single time in history where they were seeing each of these resistances broken. We see very notable moves here towards the upside for Bitcoin each and every single time, going all the way back to 2013, 14, 15, actually even going back to just early 2013, where it's a lot of time corresponding with these bear market lows leading into the bull market highs, or shortly after the bull markets began, and it's really starting to ramp up that volatility. And as of right now, what we can notice is that it is starting to coil up and head back towards this resistance. So perhaps this is going to break above, and we'll see Bitcoin bottom out here. If we look here at the current 2-weekly candle, it appears to be easing off a bit. Right now it's sitting just a tad bit above the prior candle close for the 2-weekly. Now this is an important chart that I went over in the one, I don't know if it was the last Bitcoin update directly, but one of the last 2 or 3. I mentioned here, we're still going to see one more final impulse here towards the upside, along with this ascending zone to be met, moving up towards the, or roughly the 0.5 to the 618 of this long-term multi-year inside pitchfork channel. Then we'll see anywhere from around 200,000 upwards towards 230,000 met. As long as Bitcoin bottoms out and starts to move back up by roughly the end of April, then again, factoring in the patterning that I've gone over plenty of times in past videos of each of these major impulses here, where this was, again, so this is the first one, second one, this would overall be the third one, or ultimately this would be like a 5-stage impulse wave. And what's interesting is that each of these times where you can see this was the first move, cooled down a bit, and then went back up. The first move, cooled down a bit, and then went back up. And I believe we're seeing something similar here, where we're seeing the first move, cooled down a bit, more drastic than each of the times before. Then we'll see one more move towards the upside. And each of these times, these second moves here were, especially with this second overall move, this second move here was shorter than the first. And for this first move here, both of these legs, if you were to look at this right here as an ABC pattern, were relatively the same, although the second one was a tad bit shorter. So each of these times so far in this bull market structure, the second move towards the upside has been shorter. And I believe if it were to top out Bitcoin here by around like late June, sometime July, then it would roughly be, it would be around 1 bar, so around 2 weeks shorter. Could end up, topping out more, maybe closer to late May, early June, although it'll be, as you can see here, quite a rapid move upwards. I think something more towards right now, factoring everything. Obviously, Bitcoin doesn't continue to go lower. And then even more so, if obviously the bull market is over, then none of this matters. Which again, I don't particularly think that is too set in stone or something that is very clearly shown in the charts thus far. So right now, again, I'm still looking personally towards late June, more so around July, maybe extending as we'll see Bitcoin move up here, maybe sit sideways for a bit from July to August and start going down maybe late August, September. And then this is when I think personally the bull market would be over. What is also interesting to note is if we look here at each of these sideways here movements, this was 11 bars. This was also again here 11 bars. So far it's been 8, so around by 11 bars it would be pushing into May. So if Bitcoin can bottom out here and start to move up, similar to how this fractal pattern or bar pattern looks, and I'm not saying it's going to look exactly like this, just kind of using this to paint a general picture, then we see something very similar to each of these sideways movements, which again, this is diverging quite substantially from, for example, as I pointed out, where you see each of these ABC, which it's more easily noticeable here on this chart. If you look here on the weekly, you can see more clearly this ABC-like movement here towards the upside, where you see the first move, correction, second move, whereas this would be the first move, more drastic correction we've seen thus far, and then a further move towards the upside, which it makes sense that we're seeing more of a pullback this time around, I believe, because each time, I believe it's been roughly about the same thus far. Even if we look here at these longer term connection sideways or longer term corrections in between each of these bullish legs, this one was around well, this one was from top to bottom around 22%. This one here is 33%, 28%. So generally, as a rule of thumb, each of these here, if you look here, this is the first bullish move was 100%. The second one here was almost 200%, sitting at 196%. As I've pointed out in the past, if it follows through again, we continue to see this growth in these percentage gains increasing each and every single time. Then we would see anywhere from around 300% to upwards towards 400%, where 300% move would be around 200,000, whereas pushing, say, 350 would be 221.8 thousand. Pushing 400 would be around 240 to 250,000, generally lining up with the range that I've been speaking about for many months at this point. Also, if we go back to this 2-weekly chart, the current price action here, as we see, this kind of double top and then a more sustained, more severe pullback and then move up. To me, it looks quite similar to this double top and then this pullback here and then move up. Where again, as I mentioned, if we take another bar pattern here and we kind of line these up along with each other, then assuming if let's just say it plays out similarly, then we would see here, if it lines up again, we would see Bitcoin bottoming out sometime around mid to late April. Going into May, we would start to see it move back up towards the $90, $95, $100,000 ranges, and then continue to go higher towards, obviously, this upside resistance zone, the 618 to 0.5 range of the inside pitchfork channel here that goes all the way back to July of 2017. Now, finally, again, if we look here at the 12 months, just to really culminate here, as I mentioned this a few times in the recent videos, but I feel like this isn't, or this is rather something too important to not just really gloss over a few times. But again, if we look here on the 12-month, the yearly chart, we can see where each of these trends are. We have 1 year, a bearish year, we have 3 bullish years here with 1, 2, 3 leading into 2017. Again, we just rinse and repeat. Bearish year of 2018. We see here 2019, 2020, 2021, 3 bullish years. We see our bearish year here of 1 year only. And then we're seeing first year was bullish, second year was bullish. Now we're on the 3rd year, and 2025 question is, will it end off something along the lines of each of these prior 3 years here for 2017 or 2020? Will it close green? Will it not close green? Will it continue to push up towards this ascending zone of resistance here, which begins at around 162,000, moves all the way up to around 243,000? Again, kind of validating that around 180, 230, $250,000 range that I've been speaking about. Also, just to reiterate this real quick as well, the 6-month chart here, as I went over, where you can see that each time Bitcoin, again, bull market ends here in 2011, there's the bear market leading into 2012, a new high is made here, first red candle, bear market ensues, Bitcoin goes back up, new highs are made, the prior all-time highs broken, red candles are printed here, the bear market is in, then finally when Bitcoin comes back above the prior all-time high here, sets the highs leading into 2021, we then get the first red candles, again the bear market then begins, Bitcoin is now moved up here for the 4th time back above these prior all-time highs. So we still have around basically 3 months at this point, 2 months, 27 days. If this red candle here closes as it is red, then according to going all the way back to January, beginning of 2011 here, with the trend that is pointed out, then this would solidify the bear market beginning, meaning $108,000, $109,000 was the all-time high. But if over the next roughly 3 months, Bitcoin can flip this candle green and it can close green, then that will further sustain the movement towards the upside, not only for the 6-month chart, but it will make the analysis here for this 12-month chart look even stronger as well, because if that ends up being flipped green on the 6-month, then this here yearly candle would also begin to be flipped into the green as well. But as I was saying, that's very much so contingent on within the next, obviously, as I said, 3 months is going to be very important to see Bitcoin get at least back above to the center, the median of this sideways zone here, again lining up with around 97, 98 really $95,000 to $100,000 will be very, very important over the next 3 months. But really, best case scenario, if Bitcoin's not going to see one more final move here towards the downside, then leading into this month, beginning of May, best case scenario is to see Bitcoin continue to trade upwards here, break above this longer term resistance here, the 200 EMA. Best case scenario, retest it for support, and then continue to move towards that 97 or 95 to $100,000 range, and then finally actually go back above here towards the around 100 say $105 to $109,000 range, and then continue to solidify with strength and volume support towards the upside. And obviously a lot of this is probably going to be as well contingent upon the whole the larger macroeconomic scene. Up until now, Bitcoin has been quite significantly in confluence with how the stock market moves, such as obviously the SPX as I went over. So again, I do think that it is potential that we see Bitcoin actually have its final leap towards the upside, whereas we will actually see maybe the SPX or the other indices not recover, and they enter into a long-term, or at least a medium-term bear market, or perhaps just a very quick sell-off while we see Bitcoin continue to go up, because there have been plenty of periods in the shorter to medium-term time frame where we see the Bitcoin decouple from the stock indices, the stock market at large. But eventually, many people, myself included, believe that at some point, I would say within the next 10 years or so, more likely than not, there will be a more significant longer-term decoupling where we'll start to see with these stock markets and the indices as such, and longer-term, medium-term, longer-term bear markets. So we're seeing Bitcoin doing the opposite, and medium to longer-term bull markets. And this very well could be the paradigm shift, especially with how bullish the current administration is and accepting it is and friendly to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, despite it not particularly looking like that thus far. Because even with all the pro-crypto things and the advocacies made in the current administration, obviously, as you can see here, Bitcoin's only been going down since then. But again, as I've said, that a lot of that has to do with the tariff wars. Generally, people, obviously, the psychological sentiment isn't the greatest, not only in crypto, but within the economic sphere of America as a nation, sociopolitically speaking as well. But as long as, putting political views aside and all of that, as long as the goal that is had in mind for these tariffs in order to create a more independent, financially and economically speaking, America, then we will, I would say, probably, within the rest of this year leading into early 2026, as long as the plan that is wanting to be executed by the Trump plays out properly, then I believe we will see, I think before then, another 4 months or so, we'll start to see Bitcoin recover. And also, again, the opportunity lies there as well for the stock market indices to recover. If, obviously, for the various reasons I went over in past videos, there isn't a massive stock market crash on the horizon, where we will see Bitcoin do the opposite, and we'll start to see this more medium to longer term, this more drastic divergence and decoupling of Bitcoin and the stock market and its indices. But that was all that I want to go in this video. So as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but all that being said and everything gone over, hope you all enjoyed, and hope you all have a wonderful day.
Now, won't I see you forever, start to